Protection, investment, and taxes, and your current plan for today, tomorrow, into the future, and your legacy. Remember, we're always going to lay out the truth, the facts, and what we believe regarding running against the herd and what society tells you you should be doing with your, not even doing with your money. We're going to press you a little bit on the conventional wisdom and what that conventional wisdom is telling you to do, as we believe the conventional wisdom is wrong. It's no more complicated regarding some type of plan, whether it be your financial plan, retirement plan, estate plan, legacy plan, whatever it is no more complicated than the protection component of your plan, the investment component of your plan, and then taxes, which is the number one inhibitor of wealth in this country. This is what we get to do every week here at the Money School, regardless of whether it is whatever team member that you are viewing, listening to, working with, whatever it may be. We get the opportunity to work with people all over this great country. The information that I'm going to share with you today, or the material shared in today's webinar, it's been prepared for informational purposes only. It's not intended to provide you financial, investment, or tax advice. You should seek tax, legal, and accounting advice from your own professionals. And if you don't have one, then reach out to our team and we will connect you with someone that we rely on and feel that is talking the truth and is not following the conventional wisdom. So we talk a little bit about leveraging your assets today, and this is a presentation that I've been giving for a number of years. Some of it changes a little bit from time to time, and we tweak. When we talk about leveraging assets, this is one of our bigger areas of issue where the problems in this country normally start here with our government. And if you think the government is on our side, I would urge you to consider thinking differently about that. Most of everything that they do is for the masses. And if you're looking at creating wealth and then transferring that wealth over your lifetime, then the plans that the government is laying out for you to use are not the ones that you need to be using. Again, we're running against the conventional wisdom. We talk a lot about taxes, regardless of whether or not it is in a traditional investment, an alternative investment, a life insurance policy, disability policy, asset-based long-term care policy, whatever financial vehicle that you're using. Again, I urge you to consider the tax consequences against this. And if you don't believe taxes are the number one inhibitor of wealth in this country, let's take a trip down memory lane just for a second. So here's a little chart that I've used in a number of areas, and I've termed it the history of soaking the rich. And it basically shows, and again, we'll update this slide at some point in time, but it starts from the Great Depression and goes out to somewhere around 2017. So in 1974 is what we all know as the traditional IRA was invented. And again, it was invented by the government. In 1978, whether or not you know this or not, the gentleman by the name of Ted Benna was the individual who invented and pioneered what we all know as the 401k plan. And in 1978, I tell people frequently, it made a tremendous amount of sense for higher income earning individuals that were looking for places to put money away prior to paying taxes and then allow it grow, because undoubtedly you'd be in a lower tax bracket in the future if you're in a 70% tax bracket today. So in 1978, the 401k plan made a tremendous amount of sense. However, in 1986, when Reagan cut the tax breaks or tax rates down to the high became 28 and the low became 15, I've been telling people for the better part of 2 decades that the 401k plan became obsolete in 1986. Now, that's a head scratcher for most people, because obviously we all know that people all over this great country of ours continue to use a 401k plan or a traditional IRA, simple IRA, all of those vehicles out there that allow you to put money away pre-taxed, allow it to grow tax deferred over time, and then pay the taxes later on in life. And again, 1978, that made a lot of sense. But from 1986 till today, it doesn't make any sense at all. And the reason why I say that, a couple other points, is In 1997, the government invented what we all know as the Roth. And anytime the government invents something and then puts tremendous guardrails or limitations on it, then you should start looking at that as it's probably really good for us and really bad for the government, because they start putting those restrictions on it. And that's what they did with the Roth. Most people that are making or earning a good living in this country cannot use a Roth. Now, we can get creative and, as entrepreneurs and capitalists, we always find a way to make it work. So we've got to get creative and backdoor it and Roth convert it and different things. But on the surface, in 1997, the Roth IRA was a Band-Aid fix. Back in 1759, and the reason it makes the chart is because the life insurance industry came into play around the 1759. And the reason it makes my chart is really simple. The government didn't invent it. So therefore, we don't have to play by the rules regarding using that strategy or that product in an overall plan. And then the Secure Act of 2019 came back into play. And again, it blew up 20 or 30 years of planning that people thought they were really doing the right thing. So the question that you want to ask yourself is, do you believe marginal tax rates will be higher or lower in the future? And I've asked that question, and Chris has asked that question, and everybody, if you put 1,000 people in the room, 998 of them say, well, marginal rates, tax rates are just going to be higher in the future, and they're going to continue to go up. And I happen to completely agree with you. For the one or the 1%ers out there, the 2%ers out there that don't believe in that, well, there's a couple things. One, don't talk to them. Or number two, there's a whole lot more people that want help and want to hear this message than don't want help and don't want to hear the message. So for the people that don't want to hear the message, that's fine. Just keep doing what you're doing. Keep maxing out your 401k plan so you can pay taxes later on in life. Who tells you that the tax rates are going to be lower in retirement? The government tells you that. So for the people that don't believe it, then I use this one, the history of the tax rates. So, how do you feel about the current rate? And if you walk down the road and you ask someone, hey, how do you feel about taxes today? Well, for the most part, people get their feathers ruffled a little bit. Oh, I don't like paying taxes. I think tax rates are so high. I've never paid any more. And when you look at the history of it, we happen to be in one of the better tax rate environments than we've been in many, many years. And, when you look at this chart and you go all the way back, you can look at from 1933, out to maybe 86, 89, something like that. There was about a 40-year period where the highest marginal income tax rate averaged out at 70%. And I think my next slide here's where it shows, where it says, that it shows that as much as we don't like paying taxes right now, and there's certainly ways to get it as all the way down to zero, we're not in a bad environment. And, doom and gloom is easy to talk about. So I thought I would maybe try to share a little bit of good news. So again, what I talk about is in this area, and what you're going to, I'll give you a preview. You guys have heard me talk about the book, The Power of Zero, written by David McKnight back in 2014, and then they released a revised revision of that book back in 2017. A lot of what this presentation will cover is talked about in that book. I highly recommend the book because it's absolutely a way for you to begin positioning yourself to pay as little and potentially no taxes in retirement, but you cannot wait till you get there to start that strategy. So the problem number one was the government. And this was the problem number two. And if you don't know what you're looking at here, you're looking at Theodore Roosevelt, which was the president at the time, signing into the Social Security Act. It was in August 14th of 1935 that this was signed into law. And Social Security, I'm just going to read this, in addition to the several provisions, and I use that word provisions, for general welfare, the new act was created a social insurance program designed to pay retired workers age 65 or older a continuing income after retirement. That was the desire, or that was the plan. The problem is the government missed the mark. Imagine that. Because the government at that time, the ratio of employed workers to retirees receiving Social Security was 42-1. That means 42 people were in the workforce working, earning income for every one person that was retired that was receiving a check. And the projections that the government have released is by 2028, that ratio is going to 3-1. Now, again, not to mention doom and gloom, I just want you to be knowledgeable of the fact that that's where the country is heading. Number two, tax rates over the past 20 years that we just talked about are at an enormous, historically low level. So when you take the problem that the government missed the mark, they just missed the mark. And the ratio, and people are no longer, well, they're just not having babies like they used to. You take those two and put them together, and that's a toxic combination. And then number three, and this is the part that most people don't really dive into, the tax deductions that you're experiencing during your working years are vanishing when you need them the most. Your kids grow up, they leave the home, you can't get them on a tax deduction. You pay off your mortgage, you lose your mortgage interest tax deduction. And all of those other things, as you get older, you lose all of those tax deductions. And again, that goes back into who's telling you that you're going to be in a lower tax bracket when you retire. Okay, not if you're doing something with your life and if you're following the conventional wisdom. When you think about those provisions that were, and then the problems that you're incurring there, you've got to start asking yourself, again, this was created back when everyone came home from the war, and what did they do? Well, they wanted to make babies because they were at war for a long time. So that's, again, led to the government making those poor decisions. And then let's talk, and this could very easily have been my fourth problem. Let's look at the debt and what the government continues to do. It is staggering that this chart just continues to grow. So when you put all of that together, again, these are the ingredients that are going into a disaster regarding the tax issues that all of us are having to live with. So the government has to increase your tax rates. Let's talk about the Chris Noggles of the past and the Stephen Nagy's of the past and the Brian Sheys of the past, where we all, considered a financial advisor, someone out there that was talking about stocks and bonds and investment and all of that different things. The conventional wisdom is not the answer. And what I'm talking about is that guy out there or that lady out there that tells you, hey, you need to have an asset of mixed of stocks and bonds and short-term investments and et cetera. And then they also talk about spreading your investments over several market sectors, so you're not lumping everything together. And then lastly, make sure that you're combining high risk investments of stocks and alternatives with low risk investments of CDs and bonds. And we talk about these different investment vehicles. I just think that we talk about them much, much differently. I think it was about a week ago that Chris talked a lot about the bond market right now and how encouraging it is to look at the bond rates and what they're offering out there, and the fact that you can go buy a 5-year bond and get a higher yield than you can get out of buying a 30-year bond, and how uncorrelated and how inaccurate that is. It should be the other way around. It's almost it's inverted almost. And actually he talked a lot about the inverted yield curve. So when you think about all of those traditional investments out there, again, we're going to run in the different direction. So the conventional wisdom is not the answer. It is not about investment diversification. It's about tax diversification and mitigating your tax rate risk. And I'm going to say that again because it was a long, long time ago someone said that to me, and I went, that's something that the FAs out there of the world are not talking about. Mitigating tax rate risk. It's perfectly fine if you want to be in an investment and you're earning high yields and high rates of returns and everything else, but compare the tax rate that you may have to pay towards that investment, rather than having that money in a tax-free environment or a tax shelter that you don't have to pay any taxes. And you have to do the math to figure out that some, whatever may be, if it's a 10% rate of return, but in a taxable environment, what do you have to get in a non-tax environment or inside of a tax shelter to equal those out and make them apples to apples? That goes along that conversation with the people out there that press back and say, well, the low interest rate yields inside of a whole life insurance policy are just not adequate for me. And the first question that you should ask is, have you taken the taxes into consideration in the vehicle that you're using currently or not? This guy tried to fix it. Reagan back in 86 again tried to fix this problem, but as we all know, in the political environment, when someone wants to make a deal in Washington, D.C., they have to give up something to get something. And this was Reagan's deal with Congress. And I talk about provisional income, and I used to actually remember the page on in The Power of Zero that he talks about this. But if you don't know what provisional income, which is not surprising, by the way, in 25 plus years of doing what I do, I think one or two people have known what provisional income was. And here it is right out of the book. Provisional income is calculated in that way. And I'm not going to read to you, but I want you to realize the last part of the sentence that is in gray, okay? And which is the provisional income that will not impact your Social Security benefits and other areas are a Roth IRA, life insurance, and a high equity collateral mortgage. So because we talk about Roth IRAs, we talk about using permanent life insurance, we talk about using mortgage or home equity lines of credit, we talk about those three things. And what the 6 areas of provisional income are listed right there, which are your Social Security distributions that are taken out of a tax postponed bucket, which are your IRAs and 401k plans. And the real estate people out there, I just want you to understand that rental income does not sidestep provisional income. So be careful about that. I'm not telling you don't use real estate. I'm telling you that the income that is generated from real estate is not going to sidestep provisional income. What we talk about, what David McKnight talks about in The Power of Zero, is making sure that you have your assets in the correct buckets. Okay. And he talks about the 3 buckets. And this is not complicated, guys. You have what we call a taxable bucket, where you have your checking, your savings, your cars, your ordinary income, you're making money, anything that you're receiving 1099s from, or CDs or mutual funds. All of those things are dollars that are in a taxable environment that you're going to pay taxes in any of that money in bucket number 1. Then we're going to talk about bucket number 2. And this is an interesting thing because the government always uses these fancy words to try to get people to utilize what they're inventing. The tax deferred bucket. Okay. Well, tax deferred, doesn't that sound nice? Well, if they would have called it tax postponed, then I always ask the question, how many people would have been using these types of vehicles? The 401k, the traditional IRA, the simple, the SEP, all of those things that you are postponing paying taxes on. And there's just a short list of them. Again, your IRAs, your 401ks, your 403bs, the 457 plans, depending on what different companies or organizations that you work with out there, that it's not tax-free. It's not even tax advantaged. It's just, you're just kicking the can down the road, and you're making a decision to pay taxes later on in life, when again, we believe that marginal rates will be higher. So again, do I think you can use these plans in a very short period of time, like less than a year, put money in, get a little bit of a tax break, do a conversion? So then we talk about the tax advantaged bucket. And anytime you start talking about the tax advantaged bucket, then you're talking about bucket 3, which is a lot of what we talk about here at the Money School, using Roth IRAs, using permanent life insurance. A LIRP is just a fancy name that McKnight uses in the book for a life insurance retirement plan. Bank on yourself, using permanent life insurance as a tax strategy. Those other things that we've talked about, you've heard me talk about a little bit. Asset-based long-term care. There's only, in my humble opinion, there's one carrier out there, One America, that invented and patented a product 30 plus years ago. And they're the only option, in my humble opinion, regarding long-term care, because they're the only company out there that will pay a lifetime unlimited benefit for anyone that is under claim. So HSAs, we talked about last week, where you need to be funding them because of the tax treatment. And then the last bullet, there's always some type of barrier of entry into these areas. And again, that's because some of these the government created, like the Roth, and the other ones the government didn't create. But the barriers are always, there's contribution limits. If you want to get into life insurance, you got to be healthy. Some of those, you have to have capital gains. There's just strict rules that apply to getting into the tax advantaged bucket. And again, when you think of that, there are reasons that the government have put have put those types of measures in place for you to not be able to use them, or again, there's just barriers of entry. So again, problem number one, the government continues to make it harder and harder for you to keep more of your dollars that you earn. Social Security did not help. And the fact that the population has diminished over that period of time put a huge burden on it also. So when you start looking at the goal, 0% tax bracket, how do you get there? Okay. All of us have different dollars in different buckets, but there's a number, or there's a threshold for you to be able, for you to hold your assets in those different types of buckets. And after you pass that threshold, then it's a matter of start repositioning assets from one pocket to another pocket, one bucket to another bucket, and continue to move them around. So when we talk about your taxable bucket, I talk about an emergency fund. It's financial planning 101. In that bucket, anything greater than probably 6 months of overhead or expenses needs to be repositioned. I use the term reposition. Brent, Chris, they talk about using your infinite banking policy. Again, we're talking about the same concept. We're just using a little bit different terminology. And then you have your tax postpone bucket. And again, this is where, think of it this way. If you have a 401k plan and your employer is matching you, well, then you're never going to hear me tell you not to take free money. So even if it's in a traditional 401k plan, take all the free money that someone's going to give you. But after that, then you have to start thinking about repositioning it, getting it out of the tax deferred / postponed bucket and converting it into your tax advantage bucket. And after you reposition 1 and 2 over to 3, then you're beginning to take that road to a 0% tax bracket. This chart really kind of spells things out for you. And I think I have 2 or 3 slides left. And then if there's any kind of Q&A, then we can go that direction and we'll go from there. So when you look at the different, maybe 8 or 9 or 10 things that we talked about today, which are down the vertical column, and then you look at the tax areas that most of us, if not all of us, have to concern ourselves with across the horizontal axis. So let's start with horizontal at the top. You're going to have ordinary income tax, depending on what state you live in. You're going to have state income, capital gain rates, we all know about, qualified dividend rates, we all know about. We all know about 10% penalty taxes, where you're trying to evade or invade your retirement accounts, your IRAs, your 401k plans, stuff like that. The 3.8% excise tax, thank you, Barack Obama. And then the Medicare, Social Security, G&H, which probably less than 1% of most planners even talk about how your income is going to affect columns G and H in retirement. And then where we all want to be is in column I. When you start talking about wages and ordinary income, and then you get into stocks, bonds, here are the areas that you have to concern yourself where the government is taking your dollars. Then when we start talking about mutual funds, CDs, and pensions, everything gets hit in columns F, G, and H. A little bit different in different areas with pensions, but again, they're going to manipulate, if you will, the amount of tax surcharges that you have to pay in retirement in columns F, G, and H. 6, we start talking about the IRA. Again, ordinary income tax, you've got a 10% penalty if you have to go get it. And don't get me wrong, I know that there's areas where you can access your IRA for educational purpose, first-time home buyers, medical issues or whatever it may be. But on the surface, 90+% of us would have to pay a 10% tax penalty for you to go get your money out of those different accounts. Number 7, you still have to deal with the 59.5 rule, but now you finally got into column I, which is everything that we talk about. How do you get your assets out of a taxable environment into an environment where you never, ever have to pay any more taxes on it and continue to allow them to grow? Number 7, you get it. Number 8, your HSA accounts, you can use it. Number 9, because of the way the IRC tax code is written regarding most long-term care policies and specifically One America's. And then lastly, that thing that nobody ever wants to talk about, that horrible thing called life insurance, that correctly funded, correctly illustrated and designed can be one of the greatest tax shelters still left in the IRC tax code. I'm going to throw that link up there and I'll throw it into the chat room. If there's other questions that you may have, or you want to just talk about a specific area, if there's something that I said that you guys have questions on, let me know. There's areas that you're using currently that may be a little bit more detailed to your specific area. Let's talk about those also. I'm going to the Q&A there for a second. There's a couple names here that I'd like to at least let me know where you're at. John Blaine, where are you geographically? I don't know you. So there's the link to today's webinar that will be up in a couple days on my YouTube channel. I also put those onto the website under my webinars and podcasts for your viewing pleasure, if you will, or if you're just driving and want to listen to it again, you can do that. Again, as I kind of get ready to close this up a little bit, any additional questions that you guys have at this time? Hope start converting some traditional funds to Roth within my self-directed IRA within 2023 tax rate. I obviously want to stay within the lowest possible tax bracket when I do this. If I think it will be likely the same, should I use my adjusted gross income amount from 2022 taxes to figure out how much I should convert without moving into the next bracket? Jill, you're pretty much spot on right there. I have a tax forecasting software that I use with my clients that basically are doing that, where we're looking at your last year's tax return. We plug those numbers in, and then it gives us, I use a real sophisticated terminology. I call it a sweet spot. There's going to be a spot in your current income where there's going to be a threshold for the amount of money that you should convert at a specific tax rate. And then after you get over that number, it may kick you into a little bit of a higher rate. And then you know exactly where to stop. So your thinking there is spot on from a conversion standpoint. 1 year, it may make sense for you to convert 20,000. 1 year, it may make more sense for you to convert 50,000. Just depends on what your income is looking at that year. But your thinking along that line is spot on. So, yep, and you're welcome. Guys, I'm going to jump if there's no other questions. People are being quiet today, maybe some multitasking out there. Again, you can pick up the webinar and the podcast through the website. And then in addition, I believe we've made a decision from a money school standpoint to put all of Shey's Way, the Tax Tip Tuesday webinars are going to go under my own YouTube channel. Our editing team is going to be putting those up, and that's where they'll be housed. So they will not be being housed under Chris Noggle's YouTube moving forward. So we're going to separate those out so they're under their own channel. Again, you can get them through the website, also through the link that I just sent you. I want to thank you guys for tuning in to this Tuesday's episode. Again, it's a privilege to be with you guys. If you're looking for additional material, continue to tie into all of the Money School shows. I want to give a big shout out to Brent Kessler, last Wednesday's Wealth Wednesday webinar. Just an excellent presentation. You can't help but get excited when Brent is telling you about his story and his accomplishments by using the infinite banking concept and everything that he's continuing to run around the great country and talk about. If you're heading down to Mexico, have a great time down there. Be safe. All of that stuff. 1 second. Somebody just dropped something in here. Reagan slide was very useful. Thank you, Wes. I appreciate that. Yeah, Reagan tried to fix the problem, but he had to make a deal. So backroom deals in Washington are never one-sided. So again, good being with everyone. Have a great rest of the week. Any questions come up, feel free to reach out to me directly, and have a good one.